They don't pay $30 an hour for nothing. That's what I kept telling myself as I pulled into the gravel lot of Desert House Stop. My headlights swept across the crumbling pavement and lit up a worn-out neon sign shaped like a howling coyote. The thing sputtered red like it couldn't decide if it wanted to keep glowing or finally give up. The station was alone miles from the nearest anything, sitting in the middle of the Navajo Nation in northeastern Arizona. The desert stretched endlessly around it, red rocks looming like ancient gods, half-shadowed under a sky thick with stars. I killed the engine of Carter's rusted-out Ford and sat there, hands still on the key. Metal ticked in the cooling silence. It was a quiet that felt thick, like it wasn't just absence of noise, but something alive, pressing in on the windows. My phone buzzed in my hoodie pocket. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Noah, hey big bro, his text read. You at the job yet? I exhaled, fingers tapping a reply. Just pulled in. Place is something else. You okay? He asked. Course, you... There was a pause. Group today, we talked about accountability. I told them about the accident. I told them I'm not hiding from it anymore. The guilt knotted in my stomach. Not because he'd admitted it, but because I never had. Proud of you, I replied. Talk tomorrow always. Just be careful, Eli. I slipped the phone away. The only reason I took this job remote overnights and weird as hell was to help pay for Noah's rehab. My little brother was finally trying, and after everything we'd been through, after what I'd done to keep him out of prison, the least I could do was stand watch over gas pumps in the middle of nowhere. I grabbed my bag and stepped out into the night. The air smelled like dust gasoline and something else I couldn't name, metallic maybe. The asphalt still radiated heat from the day, though the sun had set hours ago. August in Arizona didn't cool down. It just stopped actively trying to kill you. The bell over the door jingled as I stepped inside. It looked exactly like you'd expect tile floors yellowed by time-flickering fluorescence, overhead, shelves stacked with energy drinks and beef jerky. A coffee machine sat abandoned in the corner, like no one had dared use it in years. A cassette boombox on the counter hummed low with classic rock, Boston maybe. It was less music, more ambient texture. A man stepped out from the back room, wiping his hands on a rag. Eli, he asked, you made it. He looked exactly how he'd sounded on the phone, Mr. Carter, the manager/owner/janitor. Weathered face, hair silver and tied back, deep lines around his eyes like he'd spent decades squinting into desert sun. He wore a faded denim shirt and a turquoise bracelet on one wrist. Yeah, I said, offering a handshake. Thanks again for the chance. Name's Eli, Carter, he said. His grip was dry and firm. Welcome to the night shift. Not much to look at, but she pays the bills. Not many places paying $30 an hour, I said. I'm grateful. He gave me a strange look. Brief. Gone before I could really read it. Well, Carter said, night shift's not for everyone. Last 3 guys didn't last a week. I tried to smile. Their loss. He didn't return it. He led me behind the counter, gesturing toward a small booth walled in with bulletproof glass and fine spiderweb cracks. Inside was a stool register and a tiny oscillating fan that looked like it had given up in the 90s. You'll work from in there, Carter said. Once 10 p.m. hits, the doors lock automatically. All transactions go through the drawer after that. I slid onto the stool, scanned the inside. Register's old but dependable, he continued. Gas pumps are authorized from here. You'll need to flip these switches. He pointed to a small gray panel beside the cash drawer labeled with pump numbers. We've got 4 pumps, he said. Security cameras cover the lot and store. Panic buttons here calls the tribal police. But they're about 40 minutes out, so... Don't panic, I offered, half a joke. He didn't laugh. There are rules, Carter said, lowering his voice slightly. Important ones, I nodded. All right. First, he said, no beef jerky, no tobacco, no Slim Jims to anyone with yellow eyes. I waited for the punchline. It didn't come. Yellow eyes, I asked, like jaundice. You'll know it when you see it, he said. Voice flat. Okay. Second, Carter continued. If any of the pumps start leaking black fluid, not gas, lock the doors and play track 3 on that boombox. I turned toward the ancient cassette player. What's on track 3, chant, old protection prayer. Before I could ask more, he pressed on. And third, most important, never ever answer the payphone. He nodded toward a faded blue payphone mounted to the wall near the bathrooms. It looked like a prop from a 1982 horror movie. Does it even work? It shouldn't. Carter said, gaze distant. I felt my mouth go dry. So, yellow eyes, black goo, and haunted phone calls. He just nodded. I'm guessing you're not big on training videos. Carter gave me a look. I'll be back at dawn. Emergency numbers are by the register. Cell service is trash. Don't count on it. With that, he walked toward the door. Hand on the frame, he paused. One more thing, he said, eyes lingering on mine. Between 2 and 4 a.m., things can get strange. Then he stepped out into the night. The bell jingled behind him like nothing unusual had been said. I watched through the window as his truck rumbled down the empty highway, taillights swallowed by dark. And then I was alone. The first few hours that passed quietly. I ran through the register system, checked the switches, organized some of the shelves. 2 customers came and went. One, a local woman grabbing smokes, the other, a wide-eyed college kid probably headed back to Flagstaff. By midnight, the desert had swallowed the world. No more headlights, no more texts, no more signal. Only the sound of the boombox, track after track of 70s rock, and the hum of the air conditioner that mostly blew warm air. I leaned back in the booth, legs propped on a milk crate, letting my eyes close just for a second. The bell jingled. A large man stepped through the door, built like a refrigerator. His arms were tatted up with faded ink. A rattlesnake curled around one forearm, its diamond pattern disappearing beneath his shirt sleeve. Evening, I called through the glass. He didn't answer. Just made his way to the drink cooler, grabbed a Red Bull. When he turned, I saw it. His shadow on the floor stretched too far. The shape, wrong. Tall, antler-like shape sprouting from the head. I blinked, and it was normal again. He stepped up to the booth. "Pump 4, he said, voice like gravel. Slid me 220s. I rang him up. As I passed back his change, a scent hit me. Burnt hair and wet fur. "You on long haul?" I asked, trying to make it casual. "Always is," he said. Then paused. "You're new." First night. He took the bills. Didn't count them. "Won't be many," he said. Before I could reply, he turned and left. I watched him through the glass as he filled his tank, his body stiff, mechanical. When he finished, he stood for a long time just staring at the booth. Then he got in his truck and drove away. The clock flipped to 2:00 a.m., and I remembered Carter's last words. Between 2 and 4 a.m., things can get strange. The payphone rang, sharp, jarring, like the sound didn't belong in this timeline. It echoed through the empty store, cutting through the soft hum of the boombox, which had just faded into the first quiet notes of More Than a Feeling. The cassette kept spinning, but the melody was drowned out by that shrill, unnatural bell. I stared at the phone. It was an old blue relic bolted to the wall between the bathrooms. The handset hung awkwardly, like someone had ripped it off too hard once and never cared to fix it right. A layer of fine dust clung to the coin slot. The keypad was half faded. There was no way it should be working. But it rang. Again. Again. My mouth was suddenly dry. Carter's third rule beat against the inside of my skull. Never ever answer the payphone. It rang a 4th time. I stayed in the booth trying to convince myself it was a wiring glitch. Maybe a voltage surge. Maybe an echo from an old call in a dying circuit. But some part of me, deep primal, knew better. 5th ring. I stood. 6th, I stepped out of the booth. The store was dead quiet except for that sound. It didn't feel like a phone was ringing. It felt like something was trying to get in or out. 7th, my feet moved on their own toward the wall. 8th, I stopped in front of it. The plastic casing vibrated slightly with each ring. I could feel it in my fingertips. 9th, I reached out. 10th, I picked up the receiver. Nothing. Just static at first. The kind that isn't just white noise, but textured like it's wet, fuzzy and thick like it's being piped through something full of water. Then came the voice. "You shouldn't have answered," it said. Female. Elderly. Words dragging like they were underwater. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I tried again. "Who is this?" Static crackled again. "They're using you," Eli, the voice said. "Just like they used me. Like they used her. Who are you? You want the truth," the voice rasped. "Ask Carter about his wife. Ask him what's buried under pump 4. My chest tightened. "What the hell does that mean?" The voice hissed back, then changed. The same channel, the same line, but now the voice was different. Younger. Childlike. High-pitched. Singing. "Eli Martinez stole a car," it sang. "Eli Martinez broke the law. Eli left his brother to fall." I yanked the receiver away like it had burned me and slammed it down into the cradle. The phone started ringing again immediately. No pause, no reset, just a relentless return to that awful sound. I backed away, heart hammering, breathing shallow. I stumbled back into the booth, slammed the door shut, locked it. The phone rang over and over and over 20 times. Then silence. It wasn't a relief. The silence was worse somehow, like a breath being held, like the store itself was waiting for what would happen next. Then came the smell. Burnt metal. No. Blood. I scanned the security feeds. 4 cameras, each pump in the store interior. All feeds were fine, except one. Pump 4. The feed flickered, distorted, then cut to black. I turned my gaze to the real window. A dark, viscous substance was leaking from the base of pump 4, pooling slowly across the cracked concrete. It wasn't gasoline, it was thicker, almost tar, but it shimmered unnaturally. It looked alive. Carter's second rule came screaming back. If the pumps start leaking black fluid, lock the doors and play track 3 bang on the boombox. I grabbed the boombox, popped the cassette out, flipped it over, and fast-forwarded. Click. 1, 2, stop. Track 3. I hit play. There was no music. What came out of the tiny speaker was a chant, low, rhythmic. Male voice, old, speaking in what I assumed was Navajo. The syllables rolled like thunder over gravel. The cadence was calm even, but beneath it was a scraping sound like bone on stone. Outside, the black fluid trembled. It writhed, pulsed like it could feel the sound. It started to retreat. Slowly, it sucked itself backward into the seams of pump 4, defying gravity, pulling itself up into the nozzle like a snake coiling backward into its burrow. I stared, frozen. The final beat of the chant faded into silence. And just like that, the fluid was gone. The pump stood still. No flickering, no noise. I ejected the tape and put it back in the case, hand shaking. The phone didn't ring again, but I didn't feel safe. A dawn broke quietly. The first crack of light slipped across the desert floor, hitting the red mesas and turning the rocks gold. I'd never been so relieved to see the sun. A truck pulled into the lot. Carter's. He parked like it was any other day, stepped out in the same denim shirt, same calm face. I unlocked the doors. "How did it go?" he asked casually. I stared at him. Quiet, I lied. He nodded. We counted the till in silence. When I lifted the tray to check the larger bills underneath, something caught my eye, a corner of paper yellowed with age. I tugged it out, a Polaroid. In it, a younger Carter stood beside someone, something too tall, too thin, body wrapped in shadow. Its face was blurred as if it had moved or had been deliberately smeared. In blue ink on the bottom, feeding time 1999. I handed it to Carter. "This fell out last night." His face didn't change. But I saw it, a flicker, a hitch in his breath. "Halloween," he said. "Old joke. Me and a buddy goofing around." He tucked it into his pocket. "Halloween," I echoed. He nodded. "Spooky stuff." "Right." He pulled an envelope from his back pocket and handed it to me. "Bonus," he said. "We do that for your first night. Helps with retention." Inside was a crisp $100 bill. Blood money. I folded it, slipped it into my pocket. My throat felt dry. He walked me to the door. "Oh," and Eli, I turned. "If you used the bathroom last night..." He paused, tone casual. "Notice anything odd in the mirror?" I blinked. "No," he smiled thinly. "Just asking. Some of the guys before you said it plays tricks." Outside, the sun had fully risen. I sat in my car for a long moment before starting the engine. My phone buzzed signal back. A text from Noah. "Had a weird dream. Mom was talking to a coyote. She said you're lying about something. You okay?" My hands trembled as I typed. "Fine, long night." But I didn't send it. I opened my browser instead. Search Skinwalker Navajo legend. As I read, the color drained from my face. Shapeshifters. Yellow eyes. Mimic voices of loved ones. Feed on energy. Appear at crossroads. Prefer isolated places. Like desert howl stop. I started the car and drove. But I knew the truth. The desert doesn't forget. And whatever I'd walked into that night, it had already begun to remember me. The third night started quiet. Too quiet. The boombox played the same 3 cassettes on loop: Boston, Kansas, and Blue Oyster Cult, and I realized I'd memorized the opening chords of Don't Fear the Reaper without even trying. That irony wasn't lost on me. By 10:05 p.m., the front doors clicked shut automatically. I locked myself in the booth like usual, double-checked the panic button under the counter, and flipped through the same laminated shift manual Carter had left behind. I wasn't reading it. I just needed to keep my hands busy. Everything felt still. But it wasn't peace, it was expectation. I couldn't stop thinking about the voice on the phone, the chant, the black fluid, and Carter. That photo haunted me. Feeding time 1999. The figure beside him, tall, skeletal, wrong, was burned into my memory. It hadn't just been a Halloween joke. Not a chance. I glanced at the security screens. All 4 pumps. Empty. Still, the gravel lot shimmered faintly under the old halogen lights. But I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being watched. My phone buzzed. Noah. Had the dream again. I swallowed. Typed, the same one, yeah, but she changed this time. Her face kept shifting. And she told me he's feeding them. He doesn't know it, but he is. My blood turned cold. I stared at the screen, unsure what to say. I hadn't told him anything. Not the chant, not the woman with yellow eyes, not the leaking pump, but somehow through a dream he knew. I left him on red. Something about involving him anymore felt dangerous. Boh. At 1:08 a.m., the lights above pump 2 flickered. I leaned forward in the booth. The figure was barely visible, a man standing just at the edge of the light, motionless. I watched him for over a minute. He never moved. Then, without warning, the feed cut to static. I checked the real window. No one there. I stepped out of the booth and approached the front door cautiously. My reflection in the glass looked distorted. Longer than it should be. Like I was standing at a weird angle, but I wasn't. Inside the fluorescence flickered. I walked toward the back hallway, toward the employee restroom, the only place I hadn't really explored. Something about that narrow corridor had always felt colder than the rest of the building, like it held more air than it should. The restroom was clean, spotless even, like no one had ever used it. But the mirror, it was wrong. The reflection was off by a fraction of a second. My movements echoed just a little too late. When I lifted my hand, my reflection followed, but slower. Not sluggish, deliberate. I leaned in nose inches from the glass, and my reflection didn't. It stayed still. Then it smiled. I stumbled back, heart racing. The reflection mimicked the panic perfectly, now raising its hands, stepping back. Back in sync, but I'd seen it. That smile, it wasn't mine. I left the bathroom and slammed the door behind me. Back in the booth, I sat frozen. The air felt thicker. My skin itched like something invisible crawled over it. That's when I heard the knock. 3 slow taps. Not on the door, on the glass behind me. I turned fast. Nothing there. But on the window's fog surface, a handprint had appeared. Small, human, palm facing in, like someone had pressed it from inside the booth. Assam. I forced myself to breathe, to move, to think. Distraction. I needed a task. Something mechanical. I remembered the bodega-style register drawer had been sticking lately. Maybe I could take it apart, tighten it up. I opened the till, lifted the tray, and there it was again. Another Polaroid. This one was older, faded to sepia. Same pump, same weird figure beside it, bone-thin, wrapped in burlap or rawhide or something ancient. But this time there was a name written beneath it, Carter Yazy, 1974. The last name was Navajo. That's why the bracelet, I thought. But also, what the hell was he doing in a photo that old-looking, nearly the same? I flipped the photo. On the back, someone had scrawled, "The watcher is not the warden." I didn't know what that meant, but it made my skin crawl. I tucked the photo into my pocket. At 2:37 a.m., the boombox glitched. The tape stopped mid-song, no click, no rewind, just silence. I walked over to check it. As I touched the eject button, the lights above the pumps cut out. All at once, the only light left was the faint green glow of the open 24-hour sign in the window. I didn't hear the bell, but when I turned around, someone was inside the store. A woman. She stood facing the jerky display, her back to me. Her hair was long, stringy, stuck to her neck like seaweed. She wore a sundress white, or had once been, now stained with something dark around the hem. I swallowed hard. "Can I help you?" I asked, voice thin. She didn't move. "Ma'am." She finally turned. Her face looked normal. Tired, maybe. Middle-aged. But her eyes, they were all wrong. The whites were gone, swallowed by irises too large, glowing dull gold under the dying fluorescence. I backed toward the booth instinctively. She followed, one slow step at a time. When she reached the glass, she held up a pack of jerky. "Just this," she said, voice smooth, almost melodic. I shook my head. I can't sell that to you." "Why not?" she asked. Calm, curious. "Store policy," I whispered. "No jerky after 10. She smiled. "Too wide. Too many teeth. You'll starve them," she said. Then she vanished. Not walked away. Vanished. 1 second there, the next just gone. I stayed in the booth until dawn, clutching the tape in one hand and a wrench in the other. At some point, I think I fell asleep with my eyes open. The sound of gravel under tires jolted me back. Carter again. He stepped inside like it was any other shift change. How was night 3, he asked. I stared at him. He wasn't aging. 3 nights, same lines on his face, same shirt, same calm stare. He counted the register, didn't even blink when I didn't answer. As he slid the drawer shut, I asked quietly, "What's under pump 4?" He froze for half a second, then smiled. "Concrete." He turned to walk away, then paused. "Oh, and Eli. Yeah, if something ever smiles before you do, don't smile back." Then he left. While outside, the desert was waiting, red stone, pale dust, and secrets written in heat haze. I sat in my car, not starting it. Not yet. I looked in the rearview mirror. Just for a second, I thought I saw someone standing behind pump 4. Long, thin, watching. When I turned around, nothing. But the mirror had fogged over again, and on it, in backward lettering, "Still hungry." The 7th night began differently. Carter's truck was already there when I pulled into the gravel lot. That had never happened before. Every shift for the last 6 nights, I arrived first. I unlocked the booth. I turned on the lights. I watched the sun go down. Tonight, the sun was long gone, and Carter was waiting. He stood beneath the flickering neon coyote sign, arms crossed, face unreadable. The open 24 hours glow bathed him in sickly green light. I killed the engine and stepped out of the truck. Something in the air felt off. Not the weather, the energy. The desert was too still, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. "Come inside," Carter said. Not a greeting, a command. The station interior was darker than usual. Only a few overhead lights were on. The coffee machine wasn't humming. The boombox was silent. I followed him to the back. The door that usually led to the stockroom, the one always half closed with a broom wedged in it, stood open. Not just open, welcoming. "Mr. Carter," I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "What's going on?" He turned to me. "Right on time," he said, smiling. "I was beginning to wonder if you'd come back." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But you did," he said. "You always do. That's what makes you different." Something about the way he said different made my skin crawl. He stepped aside and gestured toward the back room. I hesitated. Then I saw what was inside. The shelves were gone. So were the bulk paper towels, the busted mop bucket, the expired snacks. In their place stood a metal table. On it, a clay figurine shaped like a coyote covered in carved symbols. Beside it, a knife with a bone handle, its blade stained dark. I took a step back. "What is this?" Carter didn't answer right away. He stepped forward and picked up the figurine like it was something sacred. "This land," he said quietly, "is old. It remembers things. Things older than America. Older than tribes. Older than stories." He set the coyote down gently. "My family made a deal," he continued. "3 generations ago. A covenant. With who I asked." His eyes met mine. "Not who," he said. "What?" He walked around the table slowly, almost reverently. "They're called many things," he said. "Skinwalkers. Ye Nao Lushi, witches in animal form. But they're older than that. Older than the names." He picked up the bone-handled knife and ran his thumb across the edge. "They used to roam free, but the land got noisy. Roads came. Tourists. Gas stations. They got pushed back." He looked up. "But they don't leave. They sleep." The knife hovered above the clay coyote. "And they hunger." "Die, you're insane," I said. But I didn't move, didn't run, because part of me knew. The black fluid, the yellow eyes, the chant, the photo from 1974. It was all real. "All they need," Carter said, "is a little offering. A little blood, not much. Just enough to keep them quiet." My voice cracked. "That's why you need the pumps." He smiled. "Smart boy." He gestured toward the concrete pillars outside. "They're not really gas pumps. They're anchors. Totems. Their bones are buried beneath each one." I swallowed hard. "So what happens tonight?" Carter's smile widened. "Tonight they get what they've been waiting for." He moved fast, too fast. Before I could turn, his hand was on my wrist, iron grip, cold as steel. I struggled, but he was stronger than he looked, inhumanly strong. "You've lasted 7 nights," he said. "You followed the rules. You heard the voice. You saw the woman. You played the chant." He dragged me toward the back exit, the one I'd never seen used, the one that wasn't even on the building plan. Carter had shown me on day 1. "You were chosen, Eli," he hissed. "They picked you. I'm not going with you," I shouted. "You already have," he said. The door opened on its own, and what lay beyond was not the alley behind the station. It was the desert, red rock rising like teeth, and in the center, a clearing. 4 stone pillars stood in a square the same dimensions as the gas pumps out front. Only these weren't metal. They were bone, ancient, weathered, carved with the same markings as the clay coyote. In the center of the square, 4 chains bolted to the ground. Carter dragged me forward. "You're the offering," he said. "No, you are," he shouted. "You think I wanted this? I was chosen too. My grandfather passed it to my father to me. He shoved me to my knees. This job," he said, "isn't about selling gas. It's about holding the door shut." He chained one of my wrists before I could react. I punched him with the other, but it barely fazed him. He just grinned. "You're strong," he said. "That's what they like." The second wrist, I fought, kicked, screamed. It didn't matter. He locked me in place. Then he stepped back and pulled something from his coat. The clay coyote. He placed it in the center of the bone square. "They'll come soon," he said. "They always do. But don't worry." He looked almost sad. "It doesn't take long." He turned away, back toward the door. "You're not even going to stay," I shouted. "You're just going to leave me here." He paused. "This place doesn't need keepers anymore," he said. "It needs a new heart." Then he vanished through the door, and the door closed. Not just shut, gone. The red rock closed in behind it like it had never existed. Oh, I was alone, Chito. The moon was high overhead, lighting the desert like a stage. And then I heard it, a howl, not coyote, not wolf, something that mimicked those sounds, tried to sound like them, but failed. Then another, and another, dozens, circling, getting closer. The air grew colder. My chains rattled with the vibration. Shadows moved just beyond the firelight, long-limbed, too thin, eyes glowing faint gold. I closed my eyes. "Burn it all." That voice from the phone came back. Burn it all. I couldn't. I was bound, trapped. But my mind still worked, and Carter had made a mistake. He'd left me with something. The key, the figurine, still glowing faintly in the center of the square. And I had one night left. The chains were cold, not metal, not entirely. They felt more like petrified, bone porous, and ancient, and they pulsed faintly with heat as if reacting to my heartbeat. Above me, the desert sky was bleeding stars. Around me, the things that watched didn't breathe, but they moved. Slowly, cautiously. Predators that had already decided I was dinner, but wanted to watch the meat sweat first. My brain screamed, "Move." Carter was gone. The door he'd vanished through, the impossible one, had sealed itself into the rock face. Now I was trapped, chained in a sacred square of desert death, surrounded by 4 massive bone pylons that pulsed like they were alive. But I wasn't alone in here. Not really. My hands may have been bound, but Carter had left one thing behind: his truck. I twisted, felt the chain cut into my wrist, and reached for my back pocket. I knew he hadn't searched me. Why would he? He thought it was over. And I was banking on what every obsessive man keeps near him: tools. I kept a small multi-tool clipped to the inside of my waistband. Took a mechanic's habit to break that instinct. I strained. Muscles pulled tight. Fingers screaming. Got it. With a click, the blade opened. Now came the hard part. The bone cuffs didn't have visible locks, but they were wrapped in corded sinew that looked old. Too old. My only shot was to cut it fast and hope the spirits watching were still hungry enough to delay intervening. Slash. One band loosened. Slash. The other slipped free. I was moving before I felt it. See, the clearing felt like it wanted to trap me, like the sand was deeper, the air thicker. I dove toward the bone pylon that marked the western edge. Just beyond it, down the slope, was Carter's truck. Still parked. Still idling, like the desert hadn't quite realized he'd abandoned it. Behind me, a howl pierced the sky. Not distant anymore. Right behind me. I didn't look back. Didn't want to see what was coming through the bone gate. I hit the truck door hard and yanked. Locked. Of course it was. I fumbled in my pocket, praying the keyring Carter had left behind in his haste was still there. Click. Door open. I jumped in, slammed it shut. Breathing hard. The windshield fogged. The coyote figurine sat on the passenger seat, glowing faintly. It hadn't been there before. The howls came louder now. They weren't calling anymore. They were answering. Dozens of them. I started the truck. Nothing. Dead silence. I slammed the key again. Whir. Click. Nothing. "Come on," I shouted. On the third try, it coughed to life. Headlights burst forward, illuminating the desert path. I slammed the gear into reverse and tore backward out of the clearing. In the rearview mirror, I saw them. Shapes, long and crooked, unfolding from the shadows. Yellow eyes, mouths with too many teeth. I spun the wheel and shifted into drive. The wheels kicked sand and ancient ash as I peeled out across the desert, hammering. The edge of the rock formation seemed to stretch, move like they didn't want me to leave. But I broke through, back onto the dirt road. I had no idea how far I was from the station or from civilization, but I drove like the world was collapsing behind me. I drove for what felt like hours. Then something terrible happened. The neon glow returned. The flickering red coyote. Desert howl stop. I'd come full circle. I slammed the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop in the gravel dust clouding around me. How I hadn't turned, hadn't looped. I'd driven straight. But the desert had bent, like it wanted me back. I stared through the windshield at the gas pumps. They were still there, but they were bleeding now. Each one dripping the black fluid, thicker than oil. The open 24-hour sign buzzed, then died. And then, like it had been waiting, the payphone rang. I stepped out of the truck. The clay coyote still clutched in one hand. I didn't want to go inside. But I also knew what the voice had said. Throw it in the flames. But there were no flames, just gasoline. And 4 angry altars pretending to be fuel pumps. I had an idea. A stupid, wild, reckless idea. But it was all I had. I moved fast, ripping open pump number 1's access panel with the tire iron I found under Carter's seat. Inside a mess of wires, valves, and something else. Something old. A pulse that vibrated when I touched it. Like a heartbeat in stone. I bypassed the safety valve. Gasoline began to pour out in thick, arcing streams onto the pavement. I did the same for pump 2, then 3, then 4. The whole lot reeked like a bomb waiting for permission. Now the spark. I ran back to the truck, dug into the glove box, found what I needed: a cigarette lighter and a rag. I wrapped the rag in gas, set the lighter under it, timed it with my watch battery, then stretched it on a paper towel. A homemade slow fuse, 30 seconds maybe. I stood in the lot, the clay figurine in my hand. The Skinwalkers were watching from the shadows again. But they weren't advancing. They knew. They felt the fire coming. Here's your offering, I said, holding up the coyote. And here's my price. I lit the fuse. Bok. I ran hard, didn't look back. Not until I was 50 yards down the road past the dip where the hill crested. Then I turned, just in time to see the first flash. The pumps went up like thunder. Fire ripped across the station in a chain of rolling explosions. Boom, boom, boom. A final blast lifted the roof and turned the windows into flying razors. The desert lit up like daylight, and in the fire they screamed. Not howls, human voices, wailing, begging, dying. Have to be. The figurine pulsed in my hand, then cracked. It split in half, releasing a gust of hot wind and whispers I didn't understand. The pieces turned to ash in my palm, and the screaming stopped. All at once, like a breath finally exhaled. I walked back to the road. The fire burned clean. The air was hot and silent. No more shadows, no more neon, no more payphone, just desert, still and heavy, like it was finally asleep. The fire was too quiet. I expected chaos sirens, distant howls, the desert itself screaming. But there was only silence. I stood on the edge of the highway, watching the last remnants of Desert Howl Stop collapse into flame. The pumps were gone, reduced to scorched bones. The store had folded in on itself like paper. The windows shattered. The roof burned black and curling like dead skin. It looked less like a gas station and more like a sacrificial site. The fire wasn't just burning, it was consuming. Like it had waited 100 years to wake up and now refused to stop. Flames licked the air in tall, unnatural columns, blue then white, then the color of old bone. And the wind, it whispered my name. Eli. Not from one direction, from all of them. Then the screaming started, not mine, theirs. One by one they emerged from the black beyond the flames. Skinwalkers, no longer hiding, no longer mimicking. They came crawling on too many limbs, mouths open in agony, glowing eyes wide with hunger. Then confusion, then pain. The fire had become more than heat. It was a force. It rejected them. They circled the inferno claws, scraping across asphalt, teeth gnashing like dogs trying to bite the wind. But they couldn't enter. I saw them turn to ash in real time. First their limbs, then their faces. One tried to leap toward me and froze midair. Its body broke into dust before it hit the ground. Dozens more screamed, wailed, dissolved like shadows caught in sunrise. The fire grew louder, as if feeding off their deaths. And above it all, the sky split with sound, not thunder, not wind, but something like ancient chanting echoing from stars that had long since gone cold. Ishinara, the figurine in my hand, what was left of it, crumbled completely. The symbols turned to smoke. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the desert exhaled. My knees hit this gravel. I didn't remember falling. Didn't remember screaming either. But I was. I screamed until my throat tore, until my lungs failed, until there was nothing left. I don't remember getting into Carter's truck. Don't remember driving away. I just remember watching the fire disappear behind me, like it was being swallowed by the night. The sun rose while I was still on the road. By then the sky had turned pink, soft, familiar. Civilization came creeping back in. Power lines, billboards, miles of nothing punctuated by a gas station that wasn't haunted. I passed a rest stop. It had a clean bathroom, an actual working vending machine, a father refilling his toddler's sippy cup. Normal. I pulled over, got out, and vomited until I had nothing left but bile and shaking. So inside the bathroom, I looked in the mirror. I didn't recognize the man staring back. Soot-stained face, red cracked eyes, a tiny line of blood under one nostril. But it wasn't just the grime. It was something in my eyes. I looked like someone who'd seen too much, someone who knew the desert was alive, and it remembered you. I splashed cold water on my face, sat in a stall with the door closed, and called Noah. His voice came fast. Eli. Jesus, where have you been? I hadn't called since shift 5. I'm okay, I said. No, you're not, he said. You sound like death. I laughed a little. It came out broken. Close, I said. He hesitated. I had another dream, he whispered. Mom again. This time she was crying. She kept saying he broke the cycle. But he burned the chain into himself. What does that mean? I didn't answer right away. Because I already felt it. The desert was gone, but it had left its fingerprint in me. I didn't go back to Phoenix, didn't report the fire, didn't speak to anyone, just kept driving west until the desert gave way to coast, until Noah finished rehab. Packer. A week later, he climbed into the passenger seat next to me in a borrowed Honda Civic. He looked good sober, clear-eyed alert, the strongest I'd seen him in years. We didn't talk much, didn't have to. Some things sat better in silence. We drove toward California chasing something that felt like a future. I told him we'd start over, open a garage near Oakland, something small, fix engines, stay clean, keep our heads down. That was the plan. But even as I said it, I could feel it, a stirring, like something buried deep was still watching. At a wash station off the I-10, I went inside to grab water. Noah stayed in the car, flipping through stations on the radio. When I got back in, he was quiet. You okay? I asked. He nodded slowly, then looked at me. The Navajo song, he said, on the radio. I frowned. What about it? It was the same as the one on the tape, track 3. I didn't respond. The silence said enough. That night, we slept in a cheap motel by the beach. I left the window cracked. The ocean sounded like breathing. In the mirror, I checked my eyes. Still brown, still mine. But the reflection hesitated for half a second longer than I did. Then it smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just knowingly. I thought the ocean would silence it. That's why I chose this motel. Why I kept the window cracked and let the sea air roll through the curtains like a lazy ghost. Waves crashing, night birds calling, the distant thrum of freight engines along the coast. But it was still there. That weight, that pressure behind my ribs. The feeling that something in me hadn't come back from Arizona. Noah had passed out quickly. He snored quietly, one arm over his eyes. The rehab had given him back some color, some weight, some hope. He'd been telling me about surf schools, how maybe we'd open a garage near Santa Cruz and fix old beach cruisers. I smiled and nodded, but I couldn't picture it. Not really. My hands didn't feel like they belonged to a mechanic anymore. They belonged to someone who had fed monsters and survived. At 2:16 a.m. I woke up gasping. like I'd been underwater. There was no sound in the room except the ceiling fan rattling overhead. I sat up, wiped sweat off my chest. Then I heard it. Hiss! Not from the beach, from inside the walls. I stood slowly, pressed my ear to the thin drywall. Nothing. But the bathroom light flicked on by itself. And the mirror. The damn mirror. I should have known better. I stepped into the bathroom. It was small, tile cracked in the corners. The mirror above the sink was clean, too clean, like someone had just wiped it down moments ago. I stared into it. My reflection stared back. But it didn't feel right. Again, a micro delay in movement, a twitch in the eyebrow that didn't belong to me. I raised a hand. The reflection followed, then smiled. I didn't. The smile widened. Too many teeth, just like hers. I'm Adiha. I stepped back, heart racing. The mirror's surface rippled like water in a breeze. Then whispers. I couldn't make out the words, but I felt the emotion behind them. Regret, warning, hunger. The same three chords that made up every chant in that cursed tape. I reached for the medicine cabinet above the sink and opened it. No pills, no toiletries, nothing. Just a photo, another Polaroid. This one was of me, standing behind the gas station, smiling. But I'd never seen it taken. Never wore those clothes, the caption next in line. I slammed the mirror shut. When I opened my eyes, the photo was gone. Noah stirred in the other room. I leaned on the sink, breathing hard, trying to shake the dread. But something inside me was whispering. Not in words, in instinct. Like whatever had lived in Carter, whatever had whispered through the bones and bled through the pumps, had decided it wasn't done with me yet. And worse, I wasn't sure I wanted it gone. The next morning, Noah made eggs on a hot plate. We didn't talk about the night. I didn't tell him about the mirror, about the Polaroid, or the feeling that I was slowly turning into something with memory not my own. Instead, we drove. South, always south, like if we kept going, we'd eventually outrun whatever was hunting us. Or whatever I was becoming. At a rest stop near Salinas, Noah pulled over for gas. He got outstretched, went inside to grab snacks. I stayed in the car, watched the pumps. There were 4 of them. Not identical, but similar enough. And for a moment, I swore I saw black liquid pool under pump number 2. Just a little. Just enough. Then it was gone. Hasham. Noah climbed out back in the car. You good, he asked. I nodded. Yeah, just tired. He studied me. You've been tired since Arizona. I tried to smile. That place takes something out of you, or puts something in, he muttered. I looked at him sharply. He shrugged, handed me a protein bar. Just saying. As we pulled away from the station, I glanced in the side mirror. A woman stood beside pump 4, white sundress, hair sticking to her cheeks. She didn't move. She didn't blink. But she smiled. And this time, so did I. I didn't sleep that night. Even with the sound of waves pounding the beach outside our motel, I couldn't turn my brain off. Not with the memory of her face still burned behind my eyelids. That smile, those eyes. The woman in the white sundress waiting beside pump 4 that no longer existed. I kept telling myself it was just memory. Just trauma. But deep down, I knew the truth. The desert hadn't let go. It had followed me. Hitched a ride. Crawled in through my skin, through the soles of my feet, through the blood in my wrists when they were chained to the bone pylons. It was in me now, and something in me had let it in. At 2:04 a.m., Noah sat up in bed. I could feel his breathing change before I even turned to look. He rubbed his face like someone trying to wipe away a nightmare. You okay, I asked. He blinked a few times, then looked straight at me. She was in my dream again, he said. Mom, he nodded. She kept changing faces, he whispered. 1 second it was her, then you, then someone I didn't know, and then he trailed off. What? She said. Eli is keeping the fire warm. I swallowed hard. He turned to me slowly. Eli, what did you do in Arizona, bro? I opened my mouth to speak, and I heard the ocean go silent. The fan stopped spinning. The entire motel room stilled like the world had skipped a beat. Then click. The boombox I hadn't brought with me. It started playing. Track 3, that low, haunting Navajo chant. It was impossible. There was no tape, no cassette, no player. But the sound filled the room like it was coming from inside the walls. Noah was pale now. What the hell is this? I stood slowly. My bones ached. Not from fatigue, from age, from something settling in. Noah, I said, I need you to get dressed. Why? Because this place isn't safe anymore. He stared at me, then nodded. Didn't ask questions. Didn't argue. That was the thing about trauma. Sometimes it teaches you not to wait for the facts, just to run. We were halfway to the car when the motel lights blew out behind us. Every single bulb. Pop, pop, pop. Then a voice whispered over the wind, not yelling, not urgent, just patient. You were always meant to stay. I slammed the car into drive and peeled out onto the coastal highway. The ocean on our right, black and infinite. Noah beside me, breathing hard. Where are we going, he asked. I don't know, but we're not going back. I shook my head, and for the first time in days, I told the truth. There is no back. Yeah. 3 hours later, he stopped at a cliffside overlook. The sun was just starting to rise, a thin band of gold cutting across a deep violet sky. I stood at the edge, staring out at the Pacific wind, roaring in my ears like a freight train. Noah stood behind me, arms crossed. You gonna tell me now? I nodded, and I told him everything. Carter, the black fluid, the figurine, the chains, the furor, the screams, the mirror. I told him I destroyed the station, but that destruction didn't erase a deal. It just left space for a new one. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he just asked, then why are we still breathing? I looked out over the waves and said, because the desert wants something else now. The sun climbed higher. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the last thing I'd taken from Carter's truck, the only thing I hadn't destroyed. A key, old, bone-handled, stained. It had no tag, no teeth, just a handle carved with a symbol I now understood was a seal. Noah stared at it. What is that? The spare, I said, in case I changed my mind. And did you? I didn't answer. Later that day, we drove into the hills above San Francisco. There was a shop for rent, old service station, brick exterior, 4 bays, just like the one my father used to run before prison, before addiction, before fire. I walked through it while Noah talked to the realtor. Concrete floors, steel beams, no altar beneath, no bones, just oil stains. For now. That night, I found a mirror in the back room, a big one, mounted against a rusted wall. I stared into it for a long time, and finally, I smiled. The reflection smiled back. Not delayed, not twisted, just me. But for a second, just one, I thought I saw something behind my eyes. A flicker of red, like coals, like memory. I whispered into the glass, I'm not your heart. And the mirror whispered back, you're its keeper. An epilogue. Months later, travelers stop at a new garage outside Oakland, a small place. Friendly mechanic, good prices. Noah works the front, I work the bays. Sometimes people ask about the strange symbols etched faintly into the drain grates, or the bones embedded in the concrete that no one seems to remember pouring. But I just smile. Turn the radio up, track 3 plays now and then, low, rhythmic, comforting, because the desert doesn't forget. It just moves. And sometimes, it follows you home.